Wonderful. All right. Got some windows open here. Let me know when you can see my screen. Perfect. So, welcome all to this DueDash Investor Lounge session about raising funding as a first-time founder. Before we come to the topic, as a quick intro, what is DueDash in the first place? DueDash is a digital data-driven platform to automate and streamline startup investor relations and fundraising processes. As you might know, a lot of startups still struggle actually how to convince investors, how to go through that whole process, which data is needed. In the same way, a lot of investors struggle in actually making sure to find the right startups, going through that process, cutting down on the time and efforts that we need. We bring you together on both sides from the startups investors and make sure in each step of the process, we bring in the necessary data to facilitate this. So if you're fundraising, if you're looking for startups to invest in, if you need any support on this one, join DueDash, go through the process, and we're happy to guide you here further on. We already have over 2,300 plus active users on the platform, a lot of great investors and startups, might it be Daikin, Plug and Play, and many more. So have a look at the site and go through that. In addition, for those of you who might be in an early stage or also struggle in actually answering difficult investor questions, we have created a course called the Dash Investability, built on over 50 plus years of entrepreneur experience by our founding team on the investor experience to actually know how you can answer difficult investor curveball questions and ensure that you can convince the investors. So this is as an additional support that we can offer you on your journey. We are supported by a great network of partners, funds, accelerators, incubators, startup programs, which are happy to also support you in that journey. If you're interested in anything specific, let me know. And I will be here in the session, as well as my colleague Marcus, so you can just write us if you are interested in any specific support that our partners could also offer you. With that, I will kind of like go into the session. So you can reach out to me via mike@duedash.com. I'm still here in the chat. And now I would give it to Parul, but let me just first put you here in focus so that everybody can see you as well, and our guest.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Parul Madan. Those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of DueDash. My background is I'm a multi-time entrepreneur, also angel investor, have launched different accelerator programs in the past and brought these learnings together and assimilated that into DueDash. Today with me, I have Michael Blakey joining us all the way from Singapore, pretty late in the night there, 11 p.m. But thank you, Michael, for joining us and making this time. And then I have Dr. Keith Daniel joining us from the US. I'll just make a quick introduction for both our guests today, just have a little bit of a chat, and please feel free to share your questions on the chat, which I will be moderating and asking on your behalf later on. Michael is a managing partner and co-founder of early stage VC firm Cocoon Capital based out of Singapore with a focus on pre-seed, seed stage deep tech and enterprise tech companies in Southeast Asia. And since 2016, Cocoon has adopted a hands-on founders first approach in investing. Michael has been investing, I think, as long as possible, so more than 20 years now. And prior to making his first investment, he has many accolades as UK Angel Investor of the year 2015, if I believe, and many other accolades he's achieved. He moved to Singapore to actually help his portfolio companies and decided to expand his operations in Southeast Asia. The initial check they write is from Singaporean dollar 500K to I think multi-million, and they go from there. And our next guest today is Reverend Dr. Keith Daniel. He is co-founder and managing director of Brazilian Ventures. He's committed for funding and investing in African American-led high growth companies. He has an illustrious career where he has served as executive director for big companies, also serves at Duke University in many capacities. And their commitment is towards disrupting the disparities across the investment access and opportunity, creating opportunity for African American founders. They write initial checks from $100,000 and they are taking a goal of making up to 12 investments in the fund one, and they will also make follow-on investments on promising startups there. Their thesis is pretty industry agnostic, but they're focusing on companies in Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Midwest. So I'm really happy to have both of you today and very thankful. And my first question is, why is startup investing important for you both personally? And I'd like you to share a moment that led you to become an investor. I'd let Keith answer this first, and then I'll have Michael. Love to hear your thoughts, how you got started.
Well, greetings, everyone, from Durham, North Carolina. Grateful to be a part of this conversation. Thank you to the DueDash team for having me on, and great to meet Michael as well. Excited to hear his experience, his perspective. I'm a fortunate one in many respects. I was able to matriculate Duke University as an undergraduate in 1986. And after I graduated in 1990, I started in the career services area, helping emerging adults find their way into government careers, also careers in law and public sector. And then was hired by the business school, the Fuqua School of Business, to be the first person of color in a role of directing student services and eventually MBA admission. So that in that time, in that 8-year period, and this is the late 1990s, excuse me, up until the year 2000, I got acquainted with a lot of incredible people in the business school environment, professionals who were transitioning, moving into different careers and going on to be CEOs and run their own firms and companies. And I just enjoy being in that company, but never really moved in the direction of running my own company or being my own entrepreneur. I just sort of watched folks acquire their professional degrees and supported them in that experience, and had an opportunity to travel to recruit MBAs in other parts of the world. And so that kind of opened my eyes again. And as I sit here amongst you all and folks from wherever you are, this map behind me really is an icon for me of we are in a global community, and it's incredible to meet people with ideas and seeking to be successful. And here in the U.S., success is pretty much around what you own, your intellectual capital, your ability to solve problems, and I just have enjoyed that. But primarily my career was in higher education administration. My first degree was a master's degree in higher ed administration, NC State University, by the way. But then I was responsible for the Summer Business Institute at Fuqua. Rising high school seniors from all over the country would come to our campus to spend time with our faculty, to get to know the what we call the economic landscape here in the South. And I did that for 20 years. And it really, essentially was like recess for me. Gave me a chance to be with young people who are obviously, the next generation, as we often say, is going to have to solve a lot of problems that we've created. They need to be inspired. They need to see success. And particularly for those of us who are people of color who are facing all kinds of conditions of oppression and marginalization, we need to be inspired. So I've kind of sat in that seat from the educational side. And then the questions started to come up more around race and race equity beyond equality, right? So we really can't say beyond equality. We all want to feel like we're equals across the table. But from an economic standpoint, there are just so many gaps and injustices. So I'm trying to collapse my story quickly as possible. Michael and I, we already talked before, you gotta stop us if we get going on, because my background is in ministry and preaching. But I will sum it up by saying this. Everybody needs an opportunity and a shot. Not everybody starts from the same starting point. And the numbers are clear when it respect to women, people of color, not having access to capital. So the problem was easy. Now it was, what would be a potential solution? So my colleague and I, who co-founded our firm, just essentially said, we have a long history here. We have a lot of trust, a lot of capital already built up. And so how about we coalesce and go into a committed fund focusing on high growth African-American founders, of which we need many more. And so that's kind of the essence. And I'm fortunate because I have a strong network of people and a team of people who've gotten behind me to help us start this fund.
Amazing. So Michael, let's hear from you. What was the turn point for you? What was the trigger?
I think the trigger for me, okay, thank you for that, to Keith and Parul, thank you very much for having me on with DueDash. I was never meant to be an investor. I was actually a very, well, I guess you can call me, I was a successful entrepreneur, but I was a very, very bad founder. I had all the bad traits that, founders shouldn't have. So I was very lucky. One of my first businesses I built did pretty well in spite of me. I had some of the bad traits, which I'm sure there's some people here, is prioritization and delegation were never my strength. I always felt I had to do everything. I had to work the long hours. When the company grew, I had to just work longer hours. And it severely damaged my health. But I got out, made some money at quite early an age. And it was just as the dot-com boom was happening. And I got really interested in the internet. I'm not a technical person by background. I'm very much more focused on the commercialization and the people side of organizations. And I started looking around, and I was finding some amazing founders that, because they weren't anything to do with the internet, couldn't raise any funding. And I thought, I will back these people, I'll back these founders. And the idea was to do it for like 1 or 2 years until I came with my next great idea. Obviously, that was like over 22 years ago. I quickly decided that actually investing and helping companies I felt much more rewarding. And I was very lucky early on. I had a number of very successful exits. And I felt that, a lot of them then kind of backed me and supported me to carry on investing, because they were like, you're the type of investor that we want, because you give us support, especially when things are going bad. Which also helped me when I moved out to Asia. It was actually, as you mentioned, it was help one of my portfolio companies move out here. And when I got to Asia, what I realized is that there were very few investors at all that were willing to back anybody at an early stage, especially outside of Singapore. So in places like Myanmar, Vietnam, Philippines, and what money there was to kind of more go after the consumer play. So, I felt if I stopped investing in the UK, which I've been doing for 13 years, probably nobody would miss me. There was so much money there. There was a lot of people doing what I was doing, but actually in Asia, there were very few, and there still are very, very few that will invest in kind of pre-seed, seed, deep tech and enterprise tech in Southeast Asia. So I feel I'm making more of an impact, and to be quite honest, having a lot more fun doing it as well.
Awesome. So at DueDash, we assess startups across 5 dimensions. We call it as 5T model, which is team, timing, traction, technology, the solution, TAM, which is market size. So how should early stage companies go about defining their TAM, specifically when the founders are going the VC path? It's no longer just getting angel money. And Michael, since you focus on deep tech and enterprise tech, what traits and trends do you look for in an early stage company and founders and the geography where you are? How should they define their market opportunity or TAM as we speak?
I think at the stage that I'm at, I don't really look at the TAM, because on the whole, it's a bunch of made up numbers. I can't remember the last time I saw an opportunity that did not have an addressable market of at least 1 billion. Now it's moving into the trillions, and it's just figures. It's just figures kind of pulled out of thin air. So as an investor, the first thing I look at, and I think everybody kind of thinks it, but nobody really follows through. It's all about the people, and every interaction that you have, and every interaction you have with an investor tells the investor something about you. Be it the first, how do you reach out to them? Is it like a cold email? I mean, I've had people write to me asking me for $1 million, and they start the email with, "Hey, dude." And I'm like, yeah, probably not going to be investing in you. But if it's somebody that has made the effort, like the easiest way and the strongest way to reach out to an investor, get one of the founders that they've invested in to make an introduction to you. It shows that they've put effort in. And also the the founders that I've invested in know what I'm looking for. So they will also tell the person, don't waste your time with Michael. He doesn't do consumer, he doesn't do this, but they respect their relationship with me. Just like I would, if I was to send something to Keith, I wouldn't send him something that I knew was bad, because that would damage my relationship with him. So if my founders would introduce me to say, and they would say, Michael, this is somebody that you should meet. To be quite honest, I wouldn't even read the business plan. I would just have a meeting with that founder. So that's the first kind of, and it's you do follow up after every meeting, every little aspect, because I've got to, in a very short period of time, figure out not just if you're good, but can I trust you with my money? Do you have common sense? You can teach people a lot of things, but you can't teach somebody common sense. And business, a lot of it is around common sense. The next thing I would look at is, are they actually solving a real world problem? And this is much easier. This is one of the reasons I focus more on like enterprise and deep tech. I don't understand consumers. I've given up trying to. Every time I've invested in a consumer play, I've lost money. So I kind of, but for businesses, you can tell if they're actually, if they have a problem. And I always say, I want to solve a big problem. So I look at it, is this a problem they talk about at the board? If they talk about it at the board, if it's something that they discuss in board meetings, then you know you've got automatically senior buy-in. You know, even if they don't have a budget for it, they can get a budget for it. And your sales cycle is going to be much quicker than if you're trying to sell it to somebody who has a problem lower or down in the organization. And then it comes down to, have they built a must-have solution or a nice-to-have? And you take those 3 steps, you know, the people, the problem, kind of is the solution a must-have. And then the one thing which you mentioned, which a lot of people forget about, is why now? Why hasn't this been done before? You know, outside of investing in bad founders or technology not working, where I've had a number of failures is hitting the market either too early or too late. You know, if a founder comes to me and says, hey, this is a really hot sector, it's probably too late. I've got to try and, you know, later investors can invest in hot sectors, but I'm trying to kind of get at the very beginning of the wave, just as it's beginning to form. And that's why sometimes, you know, that's the risk of an investor. Sometimes I get it horrendously wrong.
Awesome. I mean, that's where the VC early risk capital kind of comes in. So you just kind of easing that pain for angels, because as an early stage VC, you kind of take that bet. So Keith, let me ask you, what is one most important factor for you when you're investing in startup? I mean, do you have a checklist or a bunch of questions that you ask and rate the answers? I mean, Michael just mentioned team is very important, product market fit is important for him, and why now? But I'd like to know from you, what do you consider important for you? Because I understand your philosophy is slightly on the growth side. And what are the triggers for investment decision for you?
Yeah, sure. We do have a basic template we use to pre-screen companies before we bring them before our investment committee. As a new fund and entrepreneur starting a fund ourselves, there was a lot of considerations we had to make, and you know, which sectors would appeal to us, where do we think we could bring value to the company beyond the check based on our networks. And it was really almost a customer discovery for us as well, in terms of the kinds of deals we thought would be investable and bring the risk down as far as we could get them down. Again, as a non-traditional VC, I can absolutely say, I mean, I can say the same Michael said. I did not expect to be doing this work. So it was a lot of time talking with folks more experienced than us. And unfortunately, we have a very deep network here. People who've been angels, who've been investors, who started funds and closed them. We have a good syndicate group here in North Carolina that we meet with monthly. We talk about deals in a variety of different contexts and different sectors. And so it's helped us, you know, just in that learning process to understand where we feel like we could bring the best value beyond the check. We haven't, of the 11 deals we've made, we've led 2 of them, and those were of the first 3 investments we made. And those were local entrepreneurs we had known a while. One of our founders was a cafe shop owner, although we said we'd only do 1 or 2 Main Street type deals that were non-traditional like that. But I'd known him for 10 years. I'd watched him weather all kinds of storms with being able to have an anchor store in downtown Durham that was still yet emerging and really pushing out a lot of entrepreneurs. So he was the definition of resilience. And again, that name is very much more than just a name to us. All of our thesis is on early stage with at least a year of revenue. So they've already, customer fit, and they've done some of that discovery work, and they're really trying to get to that Series A stage. And we're excited that of the 11, we're closing on the 11th now, but 4 of our companies have had multiple up rounds, at least 2. So that's what it is. The journey with a founder that knows their business is bringing a unique solution in a variety of different contexts. Because again, for us, it was mostly about the gap and lack of access to capital and networks. So part of our disposition was, well, we want to find the underrepresented and undervalued company that's been out there for a while, grinding and bootstrapping, and knows they're onto something, but they don't have that initial that next level of capital to get them further downfield. And that's why if you go to our website, you'll see a fair variety of companies. But it is back to the people, it's back to relationships. That's kind of my sweet spot I kind of like to see myself as a human capital person. Like, can we all be better people and have better capacity to affect our community? So we're not only making ourselves wealthier, but we're actually changing outcomes, in the community context that our companies are operating. So I'll say this to end it. We kind of had to do this dance between, are we going to be an impact fund? Like, are we going to focus on kind of ESG model, or even kind of dancing with people saying, oh, you should be a nonprofit because you're doing charity work? We're like, no, we absolutely want to bring returns to our investors. And we're basing it off the fact there are a lot of great founders out there who just don't have the edge and the access that they need. And so, relatively small as we are, we've been able to create a great ripple effect and have enjoyed the 4 years we've been investing at this point.
Amazing. So Michael, you invest in tech companies, deep tech as well as tech enterprise. So at what time do you think a startup founder gets to that point of product market fit for the products? I just want to clarify that for our audience, because I want to know how Cocoon Capital assesses those technologies, and what are those some important signals perhaps that are even deemed as growth signals that founders should know. And also, I would like to know what kind of a mix in software and hardware do you look for if there is a hardware component in a tech? And in that context, what kind of documents or material that you look for from due diligence standpoint, specifically when you're investing in early on the tech and the team. So I'd like to know your take on that.
A few questions there. Okay. So as a stage of where we invest, our fund takes out, actually, both myself and my co-founder, a guy called Will Clipton, were both entrepreneurs. And we were angel investors for many years before we actually started our fund. So you have the friends, family, and fools rounds. So we invest in, we're the fools. So we go in pre-product. I mean, we've literally at one point invested in a Thai company, which was one man and an idea. And we've gone in that stage. We're very lucky if when we're investing, the company has revenue. In terms of where we are on the tech, luckily my co-founder is very tech savvy. I absolutely hate technology with a vengeance, and I swear technology hates me, it has it in for me. But I actually think it's very, very important to have this split, because there's a lot of fake signaling when it comes to market adoption. There's always going to be early adopters of technology. Like Will, my co-founder, said he loves technology. He will play and try with every new thing that is out there. And he loves to learn. He loves to play and tinker with it and see how he can improve it. Now, if you're dealing with enterprise, like most people are probably, like in the mainstream, are probably more people like me. I didn't grow up to technology. Nobody I knew had a mobile phone whilst they were at university. I still went to a computer lab to actually write all my notes. I went to the College of William and Mary way back in the 90s. So it was a bit like the Dark Ages, is what my kids tell me. But the people that are going to be sold that technology are more like people like me. I'm more the mainstream. So I kind of look at the opportunities and say, would I be able to can you persuade me to use it? It's very easy to get some early customers. There's some people, either they've got the real pain, or you've got people like my co-founder, Will, who are always willing to try and experiment. But they're at the edges. They're not what you call mainstream. So we don't look at the first 5 or 10 customers, or however many it is in terms of the number of enterprises. We look, how can you get beyond that? Well, do you actually understand who your target audience is? And then can you go out and reach people that have got no connection to you whatsoever? And can you get them to actually purchase from you? So in terms of like doing pilots, getting at, all of this, if you can get people to pay, it's fine to get people on pilots if they're not paying. Anybody's willing to try, and there's always, but getting them to actually pay what you think you're worth, that's when you're getting more into product market fit. At the beginning, you can't do that. So you have to kind of either give them like 3 months free or 50% discount. These are the early adopters. It's when you can go to a new customer and you can say, we believe we should be charging, $100,000 or whatever it is for your product, 50, 100, whatever it is. And you can actually get them to pay that without having to negotiate a massive discount or 6 months free. So what we're investing in as a pre-seed seed fund are assumptions. And the money that we're putting into those companies is to either prove those assumptions are correct, or if you disprove them, figure out, the good founders can then learn from those mistakes, learn where they've gone wrong, and hopefully adapt their business and change it. And I've got companies that what they're doing now is totally different from what I invested in terms of the solution. The problem they're solving is still the same. It's like they went out to market, and this is where it's seen as a dirty word, but I don't see it. A lot of startups have to do bridge rounds because things don't go according to plan. When there's lots of entrepreneurs here, if you come and talk to me or you pitch to them as if it's a perfect world. Because if you don't have belief in what you're doing, we won't invest in you, so you've got to be 100% committed. But as a good investor, we've got to know that most of the stuff that you think is going to happen is not going to happen. And where people like Keith and I, like active investors, we can actually help you sometimes avoid those one-on-one mistakes. That's what an active investor does. An active investor does not actually help you run your business. It actually helps teach you to avoid the basic 101 mistakes. So you never want to have that conversation. I could have told you that didn't work. So so when you fail, it's to learn something new and try and adapt. So for me, I've had companies that from investing them at a seed stage has taken them sometimes 4 to 5 years to get to their Series A. They've had to go 2 or 3 bridge rounds to get to that kind of product market fit where they've got that 6 months of growth, with a certain business model before the big VCs will come in and give that lovely valuation and give them the big checks. And a problem that I have, and I don't know if Keith, if you have this sometimes, is sometimes you've got to figure out when they've walked to the end of the plank and you've just got to let it go. Sometimes you're like, no, I believe, and you believe in them so much and you believe in the vision, and sometimes the founders just take it too far, because sometimes you have to let companies fail. But other times you've got to stick with them because you believe, you have that inherent belief that they're onto something. They just need that little bit more. And for an investor, that's one of the most difficult decisions sometimes that we have to make.
Yeah.
I
hope
that's answered all the questions.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, but I just would like to simplify it for audience as well at some point in time. But let's move on. So since you're focused in a different way, what should the emerging startups consider when they are defining their go-to-market strategy in today's time, when the consciousness on one side is increasing, consumers are becoming responsible? At the same time, market is becoming more price sensitive. We know about inflation that is happening across the world. So how should startups think of impacts on valuation or their CAC, LTV revenues, improving their profitabilities, while at the same time remain competitive and stretching their runway? Because you are investing in slightly later stage companies. And so how should they balance out so many variables while they're building the next disruptive company?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out which track I'm gonna kind of travel down to be as succinct and helpful as possible. Um, and again, I'll be transparent in saying, as a first fund, with as explicit a thesis that we have around finding geniuses, basically, and investing in them, helping them build their teams, making sure that they are maximizing their best skill sets as it relates to, I mean, we got founders that are, I mean, their titles are chief visionary, and they're really not running the company. They're casting vision constantly, which is a part of it. Just so positioning of the team. We've seen companies of our 11, again, we have a small data set. The two that struggled the most was not able to adapt, and their team did not respond well to the pandemic conditions. One was consumer goods, the other was more health innovation. And it was hard to watch that. We had a board seat on one of those companies and some influence around that. My partner did. I wasn't kind of in the front seat there. The other made some poor choices about managing debt and trying to manage the human resource capital that they were responsible for. And so, as far as the company's ability to manage cost, I mean, that's always, how can you best control your margins in a market where everything's kind of upended. And so we do our best to make sure that they have the right kind of operating partners to help mitigate some of those challenges. Operating partners meaning if it's in operations or strategy issues, or any number of divisions or areas that can be impacted, then we want to listen. And then again, we take a position that since we're not on boards for many of them, is to be in constant cadence with their updates. What's going on? What are you facing? How are you meeting those challenges? We had some of our companies actually, in the oddest ways, the paradox of the pandemic, forced them into even a better position for their solution, because it was addressing, for example, the impact on the educational landscape and access to support and retain students. In one of our companies, Circle In, I'll just name them. It's really one of the prime examples of how in the hardest of times it can be the best of times. But again, it's a daily negotiation between deciding if you do need to scale back on some level of the operation to refocus on we're usually about that first product that's out there. So we've been helping to advance that, and then companies are trying to innovate or grow their revenue streams, and that has been hampered and slowed down in many cases. So it has led to a couple more defined as bridge rounds. But our job is to continue to listen to the founders and bring alongside them. We kind of pride ourselves when we are able to bring in a counsel or strategist and other parts of our network to help them understand the impact, what's happening in the region and in the immediate context of them being able to be successful and grow their businesses. I'll just say, life is one of those things. Every context presents the competitive landscape is unique depending on where you are. And I think as an investor, you have to decide if you're going to be, how much capacity you have to bring intelligence or support in a variety of different contexts, or if you're focusing on a particular sector. Our challenge has been, how do we stay helpful and supportive of our founders when they're in multiple sectors? And that's often meaning bringing other people alongside to address those questions. Again, I'm not sure, I might have needed that question a little bit more in advance to think more specifically how to answer your question. But those are sort of things that goes on in our minds when we're interacting with our different companies and the challenges they're facing to stay viable in such a difficult market.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, can I just jump in? I think Keith actually raises a really good point. And I think, you know, if in terms of our audience are mostly entrepreneurs, when you're talking to investors, be it angels, be it VCs, whoever it is, don't just think about the money. Investors can bring a lot more than money. And sometimes the more the value they can bring is actually the support and everything. It's not just about the money. But one of the things that I'm amazed actually happens is I do a lot of due diligence, and I'm sure Keith does a lot of due diligence on the founders, on the people, and on what they're doing. Entrepreneurs quite often feel uneasy about doing due diligence on the investors. And I always advise entrepreneurs, like, investors know what to say to get you to take their money if they really want to do the deal. But it doesn't always, like, you're literally getting into a relationship with somebody. When you're investing at my stage, and even at Key stage, you're kind of looking at an 8-year plus kind of timeline that you're going to have to be working in a very close situation with the investors. Spend time, go and talk to other founders they back, primarily not the ones they told you to go and talk to. And ask the right question. So don't ask them, are they good guys? You know, is Michael a nice guy? You know, most founders won't go out of their way to say no, but ask them questions like, when the shit hit the fan, did they still answer the phone? Did they roll up their sleeves? Did they try and take advantage of it? And I think these are the things that you've got to make sure. It's not just about us. Are we making the right investment? You've got to make sure, are the investors the right bedfellows for us to have for what we want? Yeah. Sorry.
No, absolutely. That was a very, very valid and a relevant point that you make. And I think that that's a great segue for me to pitch DueDash a little here, because we provide a structured company profile and a secure data room for startup founders, starting right from the fundraising material where they can share one-pager pitch decks. And if there is a right fit and the engagement is building on, because they can do the due diligence, so to speak, on the investor there, they can progressively share their startup's business plan, marketing plan, what have you, company documents. And what startups can also do is they can share their monthly, quarterly investor updates right from the platform as well, which Keith was mentioning earlier on. So there is a complete ecosystem of investor relations from one single system. It's one hub. And for investors, it's basically origination point right from deal flow through due diligence and portfolio management in one place. So this brings to me I just like to quickly wrap so that we can take the founders' audience questions here. So Michael, what are the short-term and long-term goals that you have for Cocoon Capital? Because we ask founders, and I like to ask a VC as well.
I think for me that the short-term goal is I want to have an impact on the region. I want to give people access to money, founders the access to the money and support to make them successful. You know, that there's a lot of opportunity within the region. There's not a lot of money, and what money there is normally goes to people who know people, who've got the rich uncle and whatever. I want to give a level playing field to everybody. You know, I don't care the background, where they're from. If they're good and they want to be successful, I want to help them be successful. I think the long term is I don't want Cocoon to be about Will and myself. I want Cocoon and what Cocoon stands for to go on way beyond what we're doing. So we're already kind of building out our replacements who are going to replace us. I mean, Will, my co-founder, is going to be moving on shortly, and we brought up the replacement. We've trained them in our vision. I will be pushed out at some point in time, and I think it's to make sure that Cocoon is not about individuals. It's about a philosophy that people that come and work in Cocoon and represent Cocoon will have for a long period of time.
Amazing. So we definitely know about Keith. I mean, the fund that was created with a vision to create an impact for underrepresented founders with Afro-American origin. Is there any other thought process that you have other than just that you would like to add on to your impact that you want to create?
Yeah, well, I will say that, Michael mentioned about, I guess the children calling it the dinosaur days when you were in college at, I think you said William and Mary. Even I grew up in the late 60s and have been fortunate to see the world kind of go through its cycles of unrest. And it is difficult to see to still have an aspiration that we can be an integrated society. So it's a bit of a paradox. We have to have a fund that's explicit towards African-American founders, while at the same time having a very diverse team of people involved in that mission. So it's not just, and it's always been, I think it's important for folks and around the world to embrace the movement for equity and like humanization of people of color, women, the intersectionalities of folks, because we are human beings. So our mission is indeed, yeah, we want to make money, but we want to be a part of a story and a side of history that says we can create what we call beloved community unashamedly. I mean, again, these are things, again, don't hear in business all the time. It's usually diversity is good for business. Yeah, because it's your bottom line. Okay, great. But I'm talking about how do we have a better human experience on this side and not have to wait until we're on the other. So our mission is broader around that, and we talk to our investors, our LPs. We say, hey, we want you to understand that we're not in this for charity. We are capitalists in the small letter C, where we don't want to be vulture capitalists. We want to be folks that are advancing economic interest that benefits more than just one segment of people. So again, that can be some dissonance there because we are explicitly targeting. We're planning to raise our second fund, and we will likely remain in this space because we think this work still needs to be done for founders of color, in particular African Americans. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity to kind of pitch that broader narrative for us.
Awesome. So I'd like to ask you some quick rapid fire questions, and I'd like to answer it in short sentences, 1 or 2 sentences. So you guys are ready?
Yeah.
I hope
So
so.
Michael, I'll have to ask first. So share one of the craziest pitch that you ever heard.
Somebody sent me a box with a single shoe, the ugliest shoe I've ever seen in it. And they said, and there was a note inside the box saying, I know you're a busy man. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. Please call this number. My deck is underneath it. And it was like the ugliest shoe. But I was like, this is creative. This is how far he'll go to get a meeting with an investor. God knows what he would do for a customer. So I gave him a call.
Amazing. Keith, how about you? What was the craziest idea or a pitch you heard?
Oh man, I don't know that I could come up that quickly. I tend to kind of give everybody some grace, and not call it crazy, even if it is. And I'm having a hard time coming up. I might need more time on that. I will say I did recently receive an email. It might have been today or yesterday. All the days run together now. Ever since the pandemic, everything runs together. But I got an email that was about. It had to be. I kept scrolling, and it was from a cold call email about this deal and how much it was going to make. And I can't believe it. I stopped reading at some point, just said, how far is it going to go? And of course I hit delete, but I don't even know what it's about because it was just a bunch of words. But
okay. Yeah. Too long a email that's what you basically got, but
yeah.
Just continue reading. Okay, so what are some of the latest trends and technologies that you're watching and feel strongly about? Keith, first you, and then I'll go to Michael.
Yeah, this whole 21st century career questions come up when we were running our institute. I guess we were really impacted by AI technology around the hair care tech industry. And we have a company that's in that space. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I mean, again, that particular industry, particularly for women of color, is the money in that is just, and I happen to live with 2 women of color, my adult daughter and my wife. So AI tech and hair care technology.
Interesting. Michael, how about you?
I think for me, fintech, anything to do with fintech, being in Southeast Asia, I don't know how many, I think it's like 300 million people unbanked or underbanked. And it's how do we get them on the beginning of the step ladders of getting out of poverty, giving them opportunity. So that's an area where we've invested in quite a bit. But as a fund, we're very open. We're investing in people. So we're just trying to find good people. And then we look at the idea afterwards.
Awesome. So Michael, who has been your childhood inspiration?
I would say Steven Gerrard, but because I'm a Liverpool fan. I think my grandfather, he was an entrepreneur, very successful entrepreneur. And he taught me some really important life lessons. So I know it's a very corny thing to say, but it is normally family that influences you, either good or in the bad way. And one of the things that I was always brought up with is that we always had dinner as a family, no TV, or there's no such thing as mobile phones then. And they always taught business. It's amazing how much I picked up. I probably picked up more around those dinner tables than I ever did at school. I was an awful student.
How about you, Keith? Who was your childhood inspiration?
Yeah, I had quite a few. A lot of them were African-American women, including my mother, who was an equal opportunity employment director for the federal government for about 30-year career. And so I grew up with a fierce and faithful, courageous woman as an only child to her. And I think, that's should be everybody's answer. Hopefully their mother. I know none are as great as our own mothers, but at any rate, I will say, for the sake of our listeners as well, Dr. Martin Luther King was really forced into the political scene. That was not his desire, but he accepted that call. And I teach a course, or I'm a teaching assistant for a course for the last 3 years on his life from a political and economic and ethical standpoint. And I'm always fascinated by the genius of the movement and made it possible to give me access to the places that I have today. So certainly Dr. King and all the people who were part of that movement, which again were mostly women. That's my answer.
Awesome. What are you currently reading, Keith?
Oh my, I have to read a lot for my profession because of these courses. That Dr. King's work, a lot of his works, and actually Howard Thurman was also a spiritual advisor to Dr. King. Those are kind of my required readings for each of the courses that we have. I'm also actually reading a book on venture. I'm forgetting the title. It's a fairly thick book I got from the business school, just kind of rehashing over some of the main topic areas of this work.
Awesome. Michael, how about you? I don't know if you were able to get time to do that, but
I suffer severely from dyslexia.
okay.
So I would have to admit, I read through. I love investor decks now, because when I first started, it used to be 80 page business plans. So I've got to say, I always struggled during school. I always struggled everything where reading for me is incredibly difficult. My founders love it though, because my emails are very short.
That's amazing. So all the books have to be an investor deck for you. That's a great business idea to just give away. So Michael, before we get on to the audience questions, I just want to ask you one last thing. If you were to give one piece of advice to young Michael, what would that advice be?
There's so much advice I would give myself. I think don't be afraid. There's a lot of, I would say early in my career, there was like, I did certain jobs, I did certain things well past the date that I knew they weren't right, but I was frightened to take the leap. And I think nowadays, if I make a decision, I go for it. I just head down, I go for it. I trust my instincts. early career, I was always I was frightened of putting myself out there, taking risks, being who I am. And so that's I felt that looking back, that probably is one of the things that held me back a little bit, even though I'm very proud of everything I've done. There are things I could have done better.
Okay, so now we'll get on to the audience questions. Michael, I think this first one is for you. So what has been the best way you found that your companies or the founders that you had in the companies that you invested in?
So what was the question? How did you find those founders that you invested in? To be quite honest, I've had to go out and find them. If I look at a lot of the founders, they've been ones that I've met at events. They've been one, I think the most successful company I've invested in. I actually taught a class. I went and taught a class in his university. And then we stayed in touch. And then about 3-4 years later, I invested in him. We kind of kept in contact over that time. But founder kind of recommendations, people reaching out to me cold, I'll meet anybody. If I believe that they've got an interesting idea and I'm interested in the way that they approach me. So I spend a lot of time meeting a lot of people.
Yeah. And now you're on DueDash, so I'm sure you'll find some amazing startups, and I'm looking forward to your engagement there. So Keith, this is a question to you from Nicole, that I appreciate your focus on African-American founded companies. Do you know of other funds focused on Asian or Asian woman focused investment vehicles?
Yeah, I did reply to her, I think directly, but I don't know any direct firms or funds that have that target thesis. When we got started, the first thing we did was become a member of the Angel Capital Association. And they had an event in Chicago in 2018, which is where we made one of our first investments. And so I recommended checking out the Angel Capital Association website or the National Venture Capital Association to see if memberships there can identify. I know there are a lot more funds out there focused on women in general, but I've not heard or know directly of any that are specifically Asian or Asian American.
Sogal Ventures is one in the US. SOGAL Ventures.
Sogal, okay.
Sogal.
I actually recently, I do have one more with me. Michael, just take the name of this person. I do have one more fund in the US, as Michael just mentioned. I do have one more. I don't remember their name. It's starting with A, but I can't remember the exact name. And they Asteria or something like that. Yeah.
It's Asteria. Yeah.
That's one. Yeah. So Michael, do investors consider idea stage company also for fundraising? And the second question is, how important or necessary is for a SaaS-based company to have traction?
No, I mean, again, it's you have to do your research on the funds. There are funds out there like ourselves, 500 startups, and a number of other ones that will invest pre-revenue. There's not a huge amount. A lot of the money comes from angel investors, but I would say, I mean, I don't know enough. I know in the UK, there's tons because you have all the SEIS funds and they mostly do pre-revenue. I know in Southeast Asia, there's 2 or 3 funds out here that invest in pre-revenue SaaS businesses. But I would say quite often it's angel investors who are filling that gap. And quite often what you've got to understand, I think where a lot of mistakes people do when they go out fundraising at that stage, they ask for too high a valuation or asking too much money. So you've actually got to understand what the market what is acceptable within the market that you're at. One of the big issues that we have a lot in Southeast Asia is the information they find is all based out of Silicon Valley. So they're saying, oh, startups in Silicon Valley are kind of raising 5 million at seed stage, so we can do that here. But they don't understand in Southeast Asia, 5 million is like a Series A, even a Series B round. So the quantums are very different. The valuations are very different as well. So research and find out what is an acceptable pre-seed seed C plus round kind of amount. And don't try and be the odd one out trying to do like, okay, everybody else is doing $1 million, we're going to do $1.5 million. Try and fit in there, because a lot of VCs are quite structured in terms of how much they can invest at a certain stage, what the size, the check size that they can do.
Okay, so the next question is, how relevant is patenting for investors? For tech investors, does it change due to the limitation if there is no patent or patent pending or something like that?
For patent, I mean, very rarely do any of the companies I invest in have patents. It's normally patent pending, or they're raising money to go out and do patents. Sometimes, look, it's an important value. If you're doing a deep tech, it's critical, but not that you have it, but that you have some idea of what you're pending. But what's more important in the stage of where the patent is should you even be patenting it? A lot of people do patents on things that offer no defensibility to actually their market and what they're trying to do. It's very easy to get around. So you've got, when you look at a patent, when we look at a patent, it says, is this actually going to actually stop anybody else from doing it? Is this just going to delay somebody? Or are you just wasting your money? And is it better to keep it as in kind of personal, like company knowledge than actually, because obviously when you do a patent, you've got to tell everybody what you're doing. So sometimes we advise companies that are actually doing stuff to actually don't go and patent it. It's going to be too expensive, and you're going to give away your trade secrets. Just keep it as company knowledge. But it's different for every circumstance. But IP, if you do get it and it is defensible, it's hugely valuable going down the line.
Keith, maybe you can take this one. So what is a good time to actually ask for support from an investor? So is it before or after, when the business is actually going well? And in terms of revenue or some other factors, so that they can improve upon that problem, which you were mentioning earlier on, that you try to get your network. I think it's in that context. So I think you both can respond to this question. I'd like to hear Keith's thoughts on that. When should a startup founder reach out to you? Is it when they have a feeling there's a problem coming, or what are the right triggers for them to reach out?
Yeah, I think as early as you anticipate a need or see an opportunity to learn. Rapport with an investor, once you're in that relationship, hopefully it's to the point where at any point you can pick up the phone, send a text, an email, say, I'd like to run this by you. I mean, I know my disposition, I do dedicate 10 hours to talk to actually entrepreneurs we haven't even invested yet. They can schedule a 30-minute call with me. We'd rather know, kind of be a part of the thought process along the way rather than, sudden or after the fact. So that's a part that's a rapport we like to establish, that don't wait. And we do try to have regular cadence with quarterly updates and things like that. But no, we want to know when the need arises.
I 100% agree. Earlier the better. I think sometimes founders are worried that if they're having a problem, the investors will get upset with them. Because sometimes they've made a mistake and they don't, God, we're going to try and fix it and not tell anybody. The reality is, investors want, their first port is they need you to be successful. No investor wants to run your business, kick you out of your business. We've invested because of you, not in spite of you. So we have a lot of resources. I've been involved now with nearly 80 startups and have mentored hundreds of others. I don't know everything, but I know lots of people who know lots of things, probably a lot more than me. So if you tell us as soon as you think it might happen, we can help you, support you to get through those difficult times. And in fact, it shows more of a maturity that you're aware of problems. It makes us trust you more. The last thing I ever want to hear is I have a phone call, which I've had in the past, saying, hey, Michael, we can't pay payroll next week because our client, one of our clients hasn't paid us. And you're like, well, this just happened where you're aware. We knew this might be a problem like a month ago. And I'm like, well, you've now given me 4 days to figure out how to sort out your funding. You're going to probably, if we do find it, probably start. If you told me over a month ago, we could have actually done something in a much more structured way. and we could have helped you, but you've now left it. There is no way that we can help you. So for us then, at that point in time, as an investor, we lose faith in you as the founder, because we're like, that was just stupid.
Yeah.
Sure.
So totally agree with Keith.
Yeah, we say at DueDash, show the investors the good, the bad, the ugly, be honest and build trust, like you said. So that totally underline that. So the next question is, what would an investor look at in a pre-revenue startup ready with an MVP, with a market which is growing with respect to TAM? And I'll just like to combine this question with it, because while it's interesting to look at the TAM, which remains inaccessible, what is your take on the SAM or the SOM aspect of it? Because while there is a problem, there is a solution and there's a good team, but still the product needs to be sold in the market. So how do you assess the market dimension there for early stage startups ready with an MVP? I
think the big missing question you've had there is, how do you get customers? What is your route to market? Again, I see so often these massive opportunities, and somebody will pitch to me, we've got no revenue now, but in a year's time, we're going to have 10 million of revenue. Oh, how are you going to do this? Oh, SEM, kind of all that. And I'm like, no, how, like, fundamentally, how are you going to get 500 customers? Talk me through that process. And quite often, that's when they don't know, oh, we'll just do partnerships. Well, what kind of partnerships? Why would they partner with you? What's in it for them? You know, why would a customer, you know, and a lot of time they haven't really captured how they're going to get after those markets. It's normally quite easy to figure out how big an opportunity is. I don't need to know to the million. I just need to know that I need to believe that there's kind of hundreds of customers or thousands, whatever type of business it is. The actual value of it, if it's $1 billion or if it's 5 billion, if it's 20 billion, is irrelevant. What matters to me is, can you actually get to your first, kind of get onto that first step and get your first kind of 20, 30 customers, whatever it is. And that is probably, for most companies, the most difficult thing to do. And that's where a lot of money is wasted. Oh, we do marketing, we'll do all of this. So I've seen so many great products, like solving real problems, but they've been failures as businesses because they haven't been able to figure out their CAC of how do they get their customers at the right price.
Right. Yeah.
So Keith, I have a question for you. This is a question from Shaina. She's asking that, do you invest in African founders who have businesses currently with an African market?
We're focused on the domestic market. We do give consideration to founders who are primarily African descent, don't identify as African American per se, but we're entirely focused on the domestic market here in the U.S.
All right. So the next question is, how do you reconcile valuation for a pre-seed phase without a product or a revenue? Michael, you would like to have a take on that?
Anybody that tells you there's a way to value a business at that stage has been smoking something. Look, fundamentally, how we normally do it, we work out how much the company needs for 18 months, and then we take 15 to 20% of the business for that money. And the difference between 15 and 20% is the strength of the founders and what traction they've achieved up till that point. So if they're inexperienced founders, like first-time founders, and they haven't, that they're, like very much pre-revenue, you haven't had a chance really to build much yet, it's probably going to be like 20%. If they're experienced founders and they've got a little bit of traction, it's probably like 15%. So I said meant 20% earlier. That's a scientific scale. And probably one of the biggest mistakes most founders make is actually either not raising enough money. They only raised money for like 6 or 12 months, which increases your chance of failure by about 80%, or not raising, or just raising the wrong amount. They think they're raising the right amount for 18 months. Sometimes, but again, if they're the first time, they sometimes don't know where the costs are. We can see some of the assumptions are, inaccurate. So for us, we want to make sure the founders have enough money for 18. So we sit there with them And sometimes, quite often, we're actually asking them to raise more money, which, even though it increases the valuation for us, it means that they have a greater chance of success, which is obviously what we want long term.
Mhm.
Right. So there is a segue to this question. How much revenue and say, if the revenue and the sales is there in the company, how does, I mean, you gave the parameters, but how would it affect in the investment decision? And what stage should they be? Should they have some kind of a prototype? Should they have some kind of like a working module, at least, for you to consider that?
Again, I will do anything. I've invested in one man and an idea. I've invested in a company that, had a, 5 or 10K of revenue, recently in Indonesia. Normally what happens is that the later on you are, if you go and talk to like a lot of VCs, and Keith, you probably come across this, that all they say is, we want 20% of the business. That's there, that they're like, okay, whatever you need, we don't care, but we need 20% of the business or 15%. And I think at the early stage, we're kind of the same. We're wanting 15 or 20%. If you've got more traction, that means you're probably going to be looking to spend more money, because you've built out the team and everything else. You're going to have a larger requirement. So that naturally boosts the pre-money valuation that you have. And as a fund, we have a rule for our initial investment into a company, we only do equity. So I know a lot of people, I know in the US, Keith, you correct me here, but a lot of people like do safe notes or KISS notes or convertible notes, whatever they want to call it. It's kind of all the same thing. And they have a different way of valuing a business. I'm kind of old school. I like to align with the founders. So I kind of do it just pure equity at the seed. But I know notes sometimes get around that whole valuation question.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier about do a due diligence on investor as part of going about fundraising. What should a founder look for in an investor? What would be some suggestions, both Michael and Keith, if you can just give your take on that?
Well, you got to understand the thesis and where their sweet spot is. Look at their company. Michael said it before. If you can't talk to the founders of those companies and see how are they relating to the investors. Certainly, when we set out our fund, we initially thought we'd have more companies more proximate to us, so we could kind of be on the ground, boots on the ground when we needed to be, but didn't entirely work out that way. We do have to get on a plane or two for some of our companies, but yeah, it's how long we're first fund. Again, we had some flexibility. We've enjoyed the journey with a lot of our companies, because this is the first time they were actually taking investor capital. So they knew we were learning and supporting their journey and not trying to take over their companies. As Michael said, most firms won't be trying to do that, but there are technically sharks. I mean, I know it's a TV show, but there really are those who are the waters are shark infested, I guess I should say. So you have to relatability, what networks can open up to you that the founders can bring, and clearly if they have sector expertise. I mean, for us, it's like we just kept telling folks, hey, you need to understand this is high risk. We come at this with a compass around both the larger context of capital access to people of color. So if we're not writing the checks, we're going to continue to be introducing you to other folks that we think could be a quality relationship, even if it's not an investor per se. So kind of look at, what's the total package, like we say, beyond the check.
Okay.
I would 100% agree. I mean, one of the things that sometimes founders need to understand how VCs work. VCs are driven not always for the best or for the founders that they're investing in. So one of the questions you need to sometimes ask or look into for a VC, what year of the fund are they in?
Yeah.
If you're in the first year of a fund, that means that you've got 10 years, maybe 12 years before you have to reach an exit. If you're in the 5th year of the fund, then quite often, we have a lifespan as a fund. And quite often you see funds going through a situation is where they're forcing an exit out of a company, not because it's the best for the company, but it's because they've got to return money to their investors, Or I've had this in one of my companies. They sold their best performing company, which really buggered up the company, because they wanted to raise their next fund, and this was their winner, and their LPs wanted to see some money coming back the other way before they would give the fund money for their next fund. And so you've kind of got to look into these things to actually understand what they do. And as I said, it's asking them the right questions. It's, or asking the founders or the people that work with them the right questions. It's like when things are getting tough, what they do, what level of support do they do in terms of outside of money? Because VCs promise a lot, but quite often don't deliver that much. So what did they promise you? What did they actually deliver? Is it worthwhile? If you were to do another startup, would you actually get them to invest in you? Those are the best type of investors with founders saying, if I was to ever do another startup and I needed money, I would go back to Cocoon, or I'd go and talk to Keith, because having him, he supported me, he believed in me, and whenever I need him, he'll come and help. That's what you need to hear from founders. Don't go to people and say, are they nice guys? Do you like them? That's not really getting into the depth of kind of the value.
So I think we definitely are overrun, and I know it's past midnight for you, Michael. I'll wrap it up with the next couple of questions here because they're targeted for you. So the first question is, what drives the 15-20% equity that you mentioned a few times? And can you lower your stack of equity if the money is repaid on an agreed date and time or something like that?
The reason for the 15 or 20 is we, as a fund, we follow on. We only invest in 5 companies a year. So we've got to deploy our money. So if we invested less into a company, we wouldn't be able to deploy all of our money sensibly. And we do a lot of work. We're very active for the companies that we invest in, and we're not allowed to charge. So I don't have a management fee. So I haven't actually taken a salary for years now. I only make money based on the return. So I'm incentivized. That's how I've kind of, incentivize myself to support every company I invest in, because I only make money if everybody else makes money. So for me, the 15 or 20% gives me enough stake in the business to actually believe that if that company is successful, I can get a decent return, and it gives me the reason to deploy. I'm not looking, nobody can, in the type of companies I'm investing in, you can't ever promise to give me a certain return on a certain date. I'm a gambler at heart. I want that big return. So I turn down, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, I turn down a lot of companies I know are going to be successful.
Yeah,
the problem is I'm a VC. I have to be greedy. I'm looking for 10, 20 times return. I'm looking for, I guess, American analogy, I'm looking for a home run. I'm not looking for an infield bunt. So I'm willing to take that additional risk on the hope that I can get a home run or a grand slam. So anybody who comes to me and say, hey, Michael, I can guarantee that I'll double your money next year. That's not bad, but I'm looking for more. I'm willing to take additional risks to get that higher return.
Okay. So last question, I think there's one more popping up, but let's try to wrap it up here, guys, because it's pretty late now. So do you speak to previous investors before deciding on investing in a company? And I think both of you could potentially answer this.
Keith, over to you.
Yeah. We try to, as I mentioned, we have a syndicate group here and that we meet with monthly, and we kind of get a feel for deals we've seen or companies we've seen together. We definitely have spoken with other funds and been invited actually to co-investment is something that we value as well. So yeah, those relationships are important to us to get a feel, especially here in our region.
Right. Okay. Michael, do you speak to any previous investors if a founder comes to you?
Very rarely do they have any investors before we invest in them. We normally are the first investors into a lot of these companies. For ones that we've kind of met through maybe an accelerator or through another organization, we actually spend a lot of time talking to other people in their cohorts to find out, and then kind of go to the people who are running the accelerators and ask them specific questions, not asking if they're good or not, but asking them more about their working habits, how they are. And we also try and get a better understanding of the founders. We normally invest in teams. We occasionally have invested in sole founders. We spend a lot of time both with the founders together and also the founders apart. And we spend a lot of time challenging them. You know, we slightly childish. We play good cop, bad cop, because we want to know what they do when they're put under pressure, how they react in a disagreement. It's, you know, when they're coming to talk, when founders are coming to talk to Keith and I, they're always on their best behavior. So we have to try and sometimes get them in an uncomfortable position and see how they react, because during the 8+ year relationship, things are going to go wrong, and you want to be able to have those difficult conversations, and you want to see how they're really going to react. And we have a very small window to get to know the founders. So we sometimes have to manipulate the situation to try and get a response out of it. And we also try and meet their family and their friends. So we like to get to know their support system. You know, a lot of times founders, we're not just investing in individual founders themselves. Founders, quite often, they have families, they have people that support. It's important for us to know that they have their family's support for what they're doing, because I've seen quite often founders' families disintegrate, and that then impacts the business. And quite often it's because the families don't understand what they're going through. Like a very quick story, I know at the end, very quick story. I never invest in friends. I have a very strict rule. I would advise them, I'll give them support, I'll give them money, but I would never invest in them. So my closest friend, who I've known for nearly 35 years now, he came to me a couple of years ago and said, I've got this amazing idea. I want to do a startup. And he's got a wife and three daughters. And I was like, this sounds absolutely fantastic. And he told me who his co-founder was. I looked at him, I said, okay, that's really interesting. And I said, so what does Anne think about this, his wife? And he was like, she's fully supportive. She's really excited about it. You know, we think this is going to be a great success. And I was like, okay, can you go home tonight and ask her, is she okay with not having a holiday for the next 3 years, for you being really stressed out, you not being able to attend your daughter's kind of events at school or support them for their oldest daughter's a very, very good swimmer. And he was like, oh, I didn't quite put it that way. And I said, go and have that conversation. And he called me back a couple of days ago and he said, yeah, I'm not doing the startup.
I think that's a practical piece of question answer that you do. That's great. Yeah. Amazing. So it's been awesome talking to both of you. I know we've overrun by more than 20 minutes here. It's been amazing talking to both of you. And I know both of you are on DueDash platform, but if founders like to reach out to you, what should they consider? Just last few words, and then we call it a wrap.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure. I always learn a lot talking to other VCs, and especially Michael. Thank you. Yeah, we have a website, and we have my contact information there, resilientventures.org or resilient-ventures.com. And again, I open my calendar for 30-minute phone calls with entrepreneurs that are looking just for some perspective or insight. So if you email me, you'll find, I'll share my calendar.
I would say the same. Look, we've got a website, cocooncap.com, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm one of those, I'm an insomniac, so late in the evening when I can't sleep, I actually answer all my LinkedIn messages. I try and respond to everybody. If I don't respond within 72 hours, please feel free to chase me. Let me know that you heard me on the DueDash on this talk. And then I'll make sure I prioritize what you guys are, because if you've had to listen to me for any amount of time and still want to talk to me, then you are a sucker for punishment. So, again, Parul, thank you very much for having me on, and it's been a pleasure listening to you as well, Keith, and I hope this has been helpful for everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Good night to you, Michael, and good day to you, Keith, and for everybody who's joined us and listened to us patiently. Thank you for joining today. We do this
Thank
on monthly basis. Please keep on a lookout how it will pan out for the summer holidays, but looking forward to you the next time we'll have the event. Have a great day, everybody, wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thanks.
So,
Bye.
bye-bye.